Hey everyone, tonight we're diving deep into the shadows of history's greatest enigmas, those haunting stories that make scholars lose sleep and explorers chase ghosts across centuries. From vanished monks who may have discovered Iceland long before the Vikings, to books written in languages no one can read, and kings who rode into the desert and simply never came back, tonight's journey will take us through the mysterious corners where fact and legend blur into one breath. So before you settle in, take a second to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy wandering through the strange and the impossible with me. And drop a comment below. Where are you watching from and what time is it for you right now? I always love seeing how many of you join me from every corner of the world. Now, turn off the lights, let that quiet hum of your room become the soundtrack, and let your imagination drift back through the centuries. Picture a monk's torch flickering in a stone cave, a Viking ship swallowed by mist, or a medieval scribe writing words no one will ever decipher. Each mystery we explore tonight has defied logic, outlived empires, and whispered one truth across time, that the past is never silent, it's just waiting for someone curious enough to listen. So grab a blanket, get comfortable, and let's begin our descent into top 12 history mysteries that defy all logic. Ghosts. Before the Vikings, the Papar of Iceland, they came out of fog and legend, longships cutting a black seam through the North Atlantic, steering by stars, swell, and the flight of ravens. When the Norse first felt the ash-soft sand of a volcanic shore under their boots, they expected the empty immensity of a new world. Instead, they found traces. Fragile human traces, Irish books with distinctive uncial script, bronze handbells of the sort used to call monks to prayer, curved wooden staves that fitted a pilgrim's fist like a memory. Yet there were no people. Only the stone silence of Iceland and the distant hiss of steam from Earth's hidden furnaces. The Norse had a name for the ones who had vanished. Papar, from Papar. Fathers, the holy men of the far west. The story seems simple. Irish monks reached Iceland before the Vikings and, disliking pagan neighbors, sailed away. But stories are trapdoors. Lift them, and you fall into older rooms. Our earliest written whisper comes from an Irish monk named Dickwil, not a Viking skald, not an Icelander at all, who around c. 825 wrote De Mensura Orbis Terrae on the measurement of the world. In its pages, amid calculations and coasts, he slips in a marvel. Irish holy men living so far north that they knew the midnight sun. He never writes Iceland, but he plants a seed, plausibility, that monks could ride the ocean's edge in skin boats and faith. The Icelandic voice arrives 2 centuries later. Between 1122 and 1133, Ari Thorgilsson, Ari the Wise, composes Íslendingabók, the Book of the Icelanders. His line is spare, almost severe. When Norse settlers arrived, there were Christian men called Papar, who left because they would not live among heathens, abandoning books, bells, and staves. Another text, Landnámabók, elaborates in the 12th and 13th centuries, repeating the relics and the departure. To read them together is to feel a chorus, but listen closer and you'll hear one voice echoed. Landnámabók likely leans on Ari, and Ari may have leaned on Dickwil. A braided cord, yes, but perhaps woven from one original strand. What of earth and stone, what of archaeology? Spades have turned the turf of Papy, an island off Iceland's east, and found Norwegian layers, not Irish cells. In the south, man-made caves hold simple carved crosses. Some scholars see a Celtic hand, c. 800. Others see centuries of reuse, and a symbol too common to pin to a date. Even the map conspires. Place names beginning with Papi or Pap could mark where monks prayed, or where later Norse imagined monks would pray. A cartography of wishful thinking, yet to fixate on proof alone is to miss the inner wind that might have filled those Irish sails, peregrinatio pro Christo, wandering for Christ. In early medieval Ireland, holiness could mean exile, leaving kin, land, and identity to become a stranger on the sea, a speck on God's horizon. Where the desert fathers fled into sand, Irish anchorites sought a desert of water. They clung to knife-edge skerries like Skellig Michael, built hives of stone where waves speak louder than men, and prayed into Atlantic gales. To such souls, Iceland, raw, austere, stripped to bone and fire, was not an impossibility. It was the logical end of devotion. If the Papar were real, what became of them? The Christianized Icelanders who wrote our sources prefer the clean answer. Monks left rather than live with pagans. But history muddles. A small celibate community dies out unless replenished. Some might have stayed, folded into Norse Gaelic households already carrying slivers of Christian belief across the sea, consolers among captives, confessors to early converts. And the Atlantic is not gentle. A Norse arrival could have been violent, and a later Christian society might not hurry to record its ancestors' destruction of a Christian cell. So the Papa sit on a threshold, liminal figures between fact and folklore, plausible in spirit, slippery in earth. Perhaps Ari's line preserves memory. Perhaps it fashions identity. A Christian Iceland from the start, with only a brief pagan interlude before the island returns to its true faith. Until archaeologists pry a bell from turf with a date no pen can deny, the Papa will remain ghosts, credible ghosts, carried on a current of text and faith, and the human urge to say, "We were holy first," stand on a black sand beach at midnight in midsummer. The sun refuses to drown. Seabirds draw white runes on the sky. Somewhere in the waves you almost hear bell metal and chant. Are they there, or do we need them there? So badly that our sources turned rumor into origin myth. This is the Papa's spell, history you can nearly touch and never quite hold. Arthur's shadow, Henry's paint. The round table as power walk into the Great Hall of Winchester and look up. A vast round tabletop, 18 feet across, hangs like a captured moon. Green and white panels radiate. The names of knights gleam in gilt. Lancelot, Gawain, Galahad, and at the place of honor sits Arthur himself. Except the face is wrong. The beard is Tudor. The gaze is 16th century steel. The painter was working for Henry VIII, not a king born in mist. Dendrochronology, the patient counting of tree rings, tells us the oak was felled around 1275 in Edward the Fern's reign. The paint is later. A Tudor rose in the center, a royal portrait presiding. What hangs at Winchester is not Camelot's furniture, but a palimpsest of desire. Medieval oak, Tudor myth-making, modern longing. It is the perfect emblem for a deeper story, how a literary invention became a political instrument and a social theatre for 3 centuries. The Arthur, we think we know, king, conqueror, centre of a fellowship, doesn't march straight out of the mists of Britain. He coalesces on parchment. Around 1136, Geoffrey of Monmouth writes Historia Regum Britannia and magnifies a shadowy Welsh war leader into a world-shaping sovereign. In 1155, Wace adds the Round Table, a simple, subversive device. No head, no seat of precedence, a circle where equals sit. Later poets lace the court with chivalry and courtly love. Quests tilt from brute prowess toward spiritual trials. The Grail glows on the horizon. Sin and honor duel in the human heart. Then comes the alchemy. Literature steps off the page. Tournaments, those violent, chaotic melees born in the 11th, 12th centuries, evolve. From massed cavalry clashes that broke bones and fortunes, they become regulated spectacles. Pardam, jousts, single combats wrapped in rituals, heraldry, and narrative. Out of this chrysalis emerges the Round Table Tournament, a multi-day immersive performance. Knights adopt Arthurian personas. Ladies preside, tokens tied to lances. Feasts and masks blur the seam between poem and polity. The earliest recorded flourishes of this fashion flicker across Europe. Cyprus in 1223 is often cited, and then the craze spreads from Iberia to the empire. Courts build Camelot for a week and live inside a better world. Why did it work so powerfully? Because a circle solves problems a hierarchy cannot. Medieval aristocracy was a web of rivalries, where a badly placed seat could become a mortal insult. At a round table, honor rotates. Precedence dissolves in myth. If Gawain unhorses Lancelot, no duke has been humiliated, just a character in a shared story. The tournament becomes a pressure valve, transmuting lethal politics into safe theatre. And it broadcasts virtues rulers once seen: loyalty, unity, holy purpose. Kings do not merely host games, they curate ideology. By Henry VIII's time, the armoured knight is already an anachronism on real battlefields, outflanked by pike, shot, and mass infantry. But in the hall and the lists, chivalry still carries enchantment. Henry paints Arthur's face with his own features and nails legitimacy to legend. The Tudor rose blooms at the table's heart. The message blooms with it. Our dynasty is England's destined flower, the heir of myth. It is not enough to rule. One must play the story people want to live in. There is a melancholy to the end. Tournaments grow more theatrical and ruinously expensive. Suits of parade armor turn warriors into moving reliquaries. The very perfection of the pageant foretells its demise. By the 16th century, the lists dim. The Round Table is increasingly a painted memory. Yet the idea doesn't die. You can still feel its magnetism in every council that claims to be a circle, in every team that calls itself a fellowship, in the enduring suspicion that power works best when it resembles equality. Stand under the Winchester disc and let your eyes travel its circumference. It is a lie that told truths about unity, about the yearning to be noble, about how rulers stitch myth to policy. The table never sat in Camelot. It doesn't need to. It sat in Europe's imagination, and from there it governed tournaments, courts, and dreams. The Last Sigh of Granada, Boabdil's vanishing January 2nd, 1492. A man rides out of the Alhambra, that palace of lace-cut stone and water music, and hands over keys, not just to a city but to a civilization. To the victors he is Boabdil. To Arabic chroniclers, Abu Abdullah Muhammad II, the last Nasrid Sultan of Granada. The image is so sharp you can cut yourself on it. A defeated king glancing back from a mountain pass, tears on his face. While his mother Aisha flays him with a sentence, history will not let go. You weep like a woman for what you could not defend as a man. It is a perfect line, which is to say it is probably legend. Legends are nets. They catch the eye and hide the deeper waters. The deeper mystery is not the tear. It is the disappearance. After surrender, Boabdil does not vanish in a puff of poetry. The Treaty of Granada grants generous terms, shaped in part by the looming presence of the Ottoman Empire, a Muslim great power watching Iberia. Boabdil receives lands in the Alpujarras, hunts in clean mountain air, fades into the quiet duties of a minor lord. Then the air thins. His wife dies. Grief works like frost in a weakened house. Policies harder. The Catholic monarchs, Ferdinand and Isabella, see in him a risk, a rallying point for the defeated, a seed around which rebellion might crystallize. In October 1493, he sells his lands back to the crown and sails for North Africa. Across the strait, the stage is smaller and the audience less forgiving. Boabdil lands in Morocco, in the city of Fez. Under the Wattasid sultans, Berber rulers beset by Portuguese pressure on the coast and by a rising southern rival, the Saadian dynasty, who preach a policy of iron faith and paint their enemies as appeasers. What precisely do you do with a king who lost a kingdom? He is a symbol twice over, of Al-Andalus's faded splendor and of capitulation to Christians. He can be paraded, pitied, resented. He cannot be trusted. Chroniclers disagree. The archive blurs. A 17th century historian, Ahmad al-Makraza, more precisely al-Makar, writing on Andalusi history, speaks of a long quiet life, a death around 1533 at roughly 75. A 16th century Spanish voice gives him a soldier's end, fallen in battle about 1536. But the dates bite each other. Another rumor buries him in 1494 in Algeria. The variety itself is evidence. When a man turns into a story, time loosens its grip. Modern researchers, armed with ground-penetrating radar, point to a derelict mausoleum outside Fez, where a sultan and a holy man may lie in close conversation. If remains are recovered, DNA might speak at last. Boabdil has descendants in Spain, through lines that converted and married into the nobility. It would be a delicious reversal. The last king of Muslim Granada identified by Christian blood in Iberia's aristocracy. Bureaucracy is the new gatekeeper. Permits and politics hold the spades at bay. The dead must wait on the living's paperwork. Strip away the romance and a stark logic emerges. In Spain, Boabdil was a problem to be moved off the board. In Morocco, he was an inconvenience to be sidelined. The benefits of keeping him near, prestige, a living link to Al-Andalus, were outweighed by the risks of his name. He becomes what exiled kings often become, a ghost with good manners, housed and fed, kept far from the levers. And yet, the image persists, keys glinting, the last look back, the mother's cruel line. Why? Because endings matter. The Reconquista is a story as much as it is a series of campaigns. A narrative wants a final tableau. Boabdil obliges. He gives Christendom a scene to cheer, and Al-Andalus a figure to mourn. The rest, his sale of lands, his voyage, his quiet tread through Fez's alleys, lacks theatre. History selects for drama. Archives swallow the drab, stand in the Mirador de San Nicolas, where the Alhambra burns red in late sun. Imagine a man leaving everything a man can leave. Behind him fountains whisper verses. Ahead a sea that does not care. Did he die in bed, old and forgotten? Or under banners in a confused skirmish, or in a foreign town 2 years after a final sailing? The answer matters less than this. When Granada's gates closed behind him, a world ended. Not the people, not the arts, not the memory, but the world where Arabic was the language of law and prayer in Iberia, where minarets argued with bell towers, where tolerance and trauma braided into a civilization unlike any other. Boabdil did not simply disappear. He became absence made flesh, a reminder that some thresholds are crossed only once, and that after we hand over our keys, the house is never truly ours again. The Lost Voyage of the Vivaldi Brothers, 1291. Sailing off the edge of the world, Genoa, May 1291. The harbour breathes smoke and salt. Merchants shout. Rigging clatters like prayer beads. Amid the noise, 2 galleys stand apart, sleek, narrow, hungry-looking. On their prows gleam the names Sanctus Antonius and Allegranza, holy words painted on ships bound for unholy peril. Their captains, brothers Ugolino and Vandino Vivaldi, claim they will reach the Indies by sea, sail south past the Pillars of Hercules, follow Africa's coast, and emerge where spices bloom and gold flows. No crusade, no map, only ambition wrapped in prayer. To 13th century Genoa, this is half madness, half miracle. The spice trade is the bloodstream of Europe. Pepper, cinnamon, nutmeg, cloves, each grain worth its weight in gold, each sack taxed a dozen times before it reaches a noble's table. The routes through the Levant have collapsed. The Crusader fortress of Acre has fallen, and Muslim powers once again seal the East. Genoa's rivals, Venice and Arab middlemen, control what remains. So the Vivaldis offer a dream the city cannot ignore. Why pay others? Let us sail to the source. Their ships are engineering marvels of their world. Galleys, light and fast, propelled by oarsmen and lateen sails. Perfect for the Mediterranean, fatal for the Atlantic. They can sprint across calm seas, but not survive the long rolling fury of ocean swells. Their decks ride barely 4 feet above the water. A single rogue wave can fill them like a grave. They carry food and water for a week, because every foot of storage is claimed by the backs of 150 rowers. Yet that week of provisions must somehow last across continents of emptiness. Still they launch, prayers murmured, sails snapping. Chronicler Jacopo Doria, nephew of the expedition's financier, watches them vanish through the Strait of Gibraltar, his pen trembling between pride and dread. He records their last known waypoint, a region called Gozora, near Cape Nun on Morocco's desolate coast, a place sailors already whisper of as the point of no return. Beyond it lies a horizon unbroken by harbour, a wall of wind and water. Doria ends his account with a line that aches across centuries. May God watch over them and bring them back safe and sound. No word ever comes back. Rumour fills the silence. A generation later, Ugolino's son Sorleone Vivaldi, the name itself like a trumpet, sets off to find his father. He too vanishes, swallowed by Africa's endless coasts. A century after that, a Spanish friar's strange travelogue, the Book of Knowledge, claims that one Vivaldi ship wrecked near Guinea. The other sailed to the city of Manam in Ethiopia, where the crew was enslaved, then freed. The friar even insists he met Sorleone in an African port. It is a story stitched from half-truths and wishful geography, a Europe that imagines the edge of the world, populated by dog-headed men, and the realm of Prester John. 2 centuries later, in 1455, Genoese navigator Antonio Usodimare, sailing for Portugal, writes home claiming to have met a man on the Gambia River who spoke the Genoese dialect and called himself a descendant of the lost crew. A convenient tale to impress his investors, almost certainly false but irresistible. Modern historians strip away the embroidery. The galleys were doomed the moment their keels cut Atlantic water. Without deep hulls to store supplies, without square sails for ocean winds, They would have been forced to land nightly along the barren Sahara coast, where no fresh water waits, only sand and salt. A single storm could scatter them. Thirst could finish what the sea began. The Vivaldi expedition was a triumph of vision and a catastrophe of timing. The right idea 4 centuries too early, yet their ghost wakes later explorers. When Columbus unfurls his charts, when Prince Henry's caravels nose beyond Cape Bojador, somewhere beneath the ink lies the memory of those Genoese brothers who dared first. The line between foolhardy and visionary is drawn only by survival. Stand on the cliffs of Morocco at dusk where the trade winds still gnaw the rock. Below, the Atlantic moves like black glass. Imagine 2 ships, candles of courage drifting toward oblivion. No wreck has been found. Perhaps none ever will. But their wake lingers, in the cartographer's pen, in every sailor's hunger to see what lies beyond here be dragons. The Vivaldis did not return. Yet the sea remembers their question, and humanity has been answering it ever since. The Sow and her 6 piglets, Justice for Beasts, Savigny, 1457, France, winter of 1457. Snow lies in the ruts of Savigny's muddy lanes. The church bell tolls for a boy of 5, torn apart by a pig. In the bitter hush of morning, the villagers drag the Sow and her 6 squealing piglets to a pen beside the courthouse. Tomorrow they will stand trial. It sounds like parody, a fairy tale warped into cruelty. But to the people of Burgundy it is deadly earnest. A creature has slain a child. The cosmic order is cracked. To repair it, the community must do more than kill the beast, they must judge it. In the cramped courtroom the Sow looms in chains. Her piglets huddle, pink and bewildered. The farmer, Jean Bailly, protests that he cannot answer for what pigs think. The judge disagrees. The record shows 3 lawyers, 2 for the prosecution, 1 appointed, astonishingly, for the defense of the animals. 9 witnesses testify. They saw the Sow bite, trample, tear. They are less sure about the young ones. The piglets were spotted with blood, yes, but had they joined the frenzy or merely stood too close? After long debate, the court delivers its verdict with chilling precision. The Sow is found guilty of murder and sentenced to be hanged by her hind legs from the town gallows. The piglets are acquitted. Their youth and their mother's corrupting influence counted as mitigating factors. The farmer, required to post bail for their good behavior, refuses. He will not vouch for creatures already tainted by sin. The piglets become res nullius, property of no one, and are taken by a noblewoman willing to give them moral supervision. Justice of a sort is done. Absurd. To us, yes, but to a 15th century mind, the trial is rational theatre. Humanity believes itself the steward of creation, perched in the great chain of being below angels, but above beasts. When an animal kills a human, the chain buckles. The trial restores divine hierarchy, publicly, ritually. The hanging is not vengeance. It is cosmic repair. Philosophers complicate the script. Aristotle taught that animals possess a sensitive soul, capable of perception but not reason. Thomas Aquinas repeats it. Yet daily life argues otherwise. Villagers know their beasts have moods, tempers, even cunning. The law splits the difference. Treat the animal as if it had reason. Thus it can be tried, defended, punished. Such spectacles recur for centuries. A 1522 record shows brilliant lawyer Bartholomew Chasseneux defending an entire colony of rats accused of eating the harvest. When they fail to appear in court, he argues that the summons was invalid because it was read only once and dangerous cats impeded safe travel. The case collapses in laughter and precedent. Elsewhere, ecclesiastical courts prosecute locusts and weevils, cursing them in elaborate Latin. The church cannot hang them, but it can excommunicate them, driving them symbolically from the parish back to Savigny. On the appointed day, townsfolk gather. Perhaps other farmers bring their pigs to watch, a warning spectacle. The Sow swings from the gallows, a grotesque mirror of human justice. Children cry. Adults whisper prayers. The piglets, spared, squeal from a nearby pen. The chain of being is whole again, for now. By the dawn of the Enlightenment, the spell breaks. Thinkers like Descartes declare animals machines without souls. If they cannot think, they cannot sin. If they cannot sin, they cannot stand trial. The courtroom doors close on beastly defendants. Yet the paradox lingers. Today we debate animal rights, intelligence, consciousness. Parrots recognize themselves. Dolphins mourn their dead. Somewhere the ghost of that Savigny sow stirs, proof that our ancestors, however misguided, sensed a kinship we are only beginning to measure scientifically. In the snowbound square, the gallows creaks. The villagers disperse, comforted that order has been restored. But the wind that whips through Savigny that night smells faintly of ash and guilt. Because deep down they all know the truth. Justice that must hang a pig is not justice at all, but fear, pretending to be faith. The Travels of Sir John Mandeville, the book that mapped imagination, picture a dim scriptorium around 1350. Candles gutter, quills scratch, and a nameless writer, clever, well-read, possibly bored, composes a travelogue under an invented name, Sir John Mandeville, Knight of St. Albans. He claims to have left England in 1322 and wandered through Jerusalem, Cathay, India, and the Isles of Wonder. He promises truth. What he delivers is alchemy, equal parts geography, theology, and dream. For medieval readers hungry for the world's edges, the Travels of Sir John Mandeville becomes the internet of its age. Written in Anglo-Norman French, translated swiftly into Latin, English, German, Italian, Spanish, over 300 manuscripts survive. It spreads faster than any secular text before printing existed. Why such wildfire success? Because it grants the impossible, a pilgrimage without danger. Most Christians would never see Jerusalem, but Mandeville lets them go in spirit, page by page, past relics, deserts, and thrones. The first half of the book is credible. He describes Cyprus, Egypt, the Holy Land, with details borrowed from genuine pilgrims like William of Boldensell. He writes reverently of the crown of thorns, the true cross, and even explains accurately that the earth is round. His calm voice earns trust. Then, almost imperceptibly, the compass spins. Beyond known coasts lie marvels, blemmies, men without heads whose faces bloom from their chests, cynocephaly, dog-headed yet wise and courteous, monopods who shade themselves with a single giant foot. He recounts phoenixes reborn in flame, a vegetable lamb that grows on a stalk like fruit, and a fountain of youth bubbling somewhere in the east. Each wonder is described not as a fantasy, but as moral allegory. The phoenix becomes proof of resurrection. The dogmen test human pride. If such beasts can be virtuous, who are we to judge God's designs? For centuries, readers take him seriously. Scholars cite him beside Pliny and Marco Polo. Christopher Columbus likely owned a copy, reading its wild catalogues by lamplight as he dreamed westward. But no record of Sir John Mandeville exists anywhere outside his own pages. Modern sleuths uncover his patchwork methods. He plagiarized Friar Odoric of Pordenone for Asia, Vincent of Beauvais for marvels, Boldensell for the Holy Land. He is less traveler than curator of wonder, weaving existing texts into a seamless narrative. A 14th century physician named Jean de Bourgogne is rumored, on the say-so of another chronicler, to have confessed on his deathbed, "I am Mandeville." Maybe, or maybe the chronicler wanted fame by proximity. The truth is lost behind a mask more durable than flesh, yet to call the book a fraud misses its miracle. It gave medieval Europe an imaginative geography, a cosmos where faith and curiosity coexisted. In Mandeville's world, the monstrous and the holy share a map. Every creature, no matter how alien, fits into divine order. He taught readers to marvel, not fear. His falsehoods led to real voyages. The age of discovery fed on his pages. Open an old copy today. The ink smells of adventure and audacity. Between its lines hums the idea that the world is vast, strange, and ultimately good. Perhaps that was Mandeville's truest journey, not across continents, but across the human need to believe that wonder itself is a kind of truth. The Mad Caliph Who Vanished, Al-Hakim bi Amr Allah, Cairo 1021 Cairo, February 13, 1021. The city sleeps under a moon pale as bone. From the southern gates rides a lone figure cloaked in coarse wool, astride a grey donkey named Kamar. No guards, no fanfare, only silence, and the rhythmic clop of hooves against sand. The rider is no hermit, though he dresses like one. He is Al-Hakim bi Amr Allah, Caliph of the Fatimid Empire, ruler of half the known Mediterranean world, an emperor of contradictions who will, before dawn, disappear forever. Born in 985, Al-Hakim was crowned at 11 and grew into power like a blade left too long in the forge, brilliant, warped, and unpredictable. He founded universities and observatories, opened libraries to the public, and personally funded physicians and astronomers. Yet he also unleashed purges so cruel that even his own chroniclers trembled to record them. He banned grapes, chess, shellfish, even the making of women's shoes. He decreed that dogs must not bark, and when they disobeyed, his guards enforced the silence in ways too grim to retell. To Christians and Jews he first offered protection, then persecution. To his advisers he offered wealth, then the sword. His courtiers whispered a name he never claimed but never escaped, the Mad Caliph. Still there was method in his mania. As his empire stretched from North Africa to Syria, al-Hakim saw himself less as tyrant than God's instrument, purging corruption in religion and court alike. Lately, though, something had changed. He abandoned silks for wool, palaces for moonlit walks among the Muqattam hills, where he said the wind spoke divine truths. On this final night, he told his attendants to wait behind as he rode onward alone. When dawn came and he did not return, Cairo shrugged. He was known to vanish for days in meditation. But by the third sunrise, worry became dread. A search party scoured the hills. They found Kamar, the loyal donkey, bleeding from a slash across its leg. Nearby lay the caliph's robe, neatly folded, stabbed multiple times, yet unbloodied and buttoned shut. Of the man himself, nothing. No corpse, no weapon, no prints but 2 sets of human footprints fading into stone. Rumors spread like wildfire across the desert. Some said bandits had slain him, ignorant of their victim's identity. Others whispered angels had taken him bodily to heaven, echoing the legends of vanished prophets. The most persuasive and the most political theory centered on a woman whose will could rival his own, Princess Sitt al-Mulk. His half-sister, brilliant, calculating, beloved by the bureaucracy he terrorized, Sitt al-Mulk had long opposed her brother's chaos. When he bypassed his own son in the line of succession, naming a distant cousin instead, she saw not eccentricity, but dynastic suicide. The night he vanished, she acted with lightning precision. Courtiers awoke to find her distributing gold to secure loyalty. Within days, the caliph's son al-Zahir was proclaimed ruler, with Sitt al-Mulk as regent of the empire. Soon after, al-Hakim's chosen heir met a convenient death. His decrees were annulled. The libraries reopened. The dogs of Cairo barked again. Did she order his assassination? Historians lean yes. She had motive, means, and opportunity, and her consolidation of power was absolute. Yet without a body, certainty remains elusive. Other stories sprouted like weeds, that the caliph, weary of worldly rule, faked his death and became a mystic in disguise, that he was seen years later in the mountains, preaching asceticism to shepherds. Among a small sect of followers, these rumors hardened into revelation. Al-Hakim had not died, he had transcended. From their devotion would grow the Druze faith, which still reveres him as divine. Stand tonight beneath Cairo's yellow haze, where the city's noise hums like an endless prayer. Somewhere beneath these streets may lie a body that changed empires, or nothing at all. A ruler who demanded to be both man and God may in the end have succeeded. He became a mystery no historian can resurrect. The book no one can read. The Voynich manuscript, it sits in a climate-controlled vault at Yale's Beinecke Library, a modest codex bound in calfskin, smaller than a dinner plate, older than the printing press. Its pages bloom with impossible life, spiraling plants that match no species, naked women bathing in green liquid, constellations that exist in no sky. Its 240 leaves are written in a language no one can decipher, an alphabet found nowhere else on Earth. The world knows it as the Voynich manuscript. When Polish-Lithuanian bookseller Wilfrid Voynich bought the volume in 1912 from a Jesuit college near Rome, he believed he had stumbled upon a lost scientific masterpiece, perhaps by Roger Bacon, the medieval proto-scientist. He was wrong, but the mystery he unleashed has devoured scholars for a century. Radiocarbon dating places the parchment around 1404-1438. The ink and pigments are consistent with that era, real, not a modern fake, but every other clue collapses. The text flows left to right, divided into paragraphs punctuated by stars and flowers suggesting meaning. Word frequency patterns mimic natural languages, yet every attempt at translation, Latin, Hebrew, Arabic, Nahuatl, even constructed codes, ends in gibberish. Some say it is an unknown cipher, Others a hoax of genius, a medieval prank for wealthy collectors. Yet the illustrations argue against nonsense. They follow coherent but alien logic. Look closer. Plants that blend European leaves with tropical roots. Zodiac charts showing naked women floating in tubs connected by elaborate plumbing. Cosmological wheels that spin through unknown physics. Was it a herbal guide? An alchemical encyclopedia? A treatise on women's medicine? Each theory glows briefly, then extinguishes. During World War II, Allied codebreakers who cracked the enigma tried their luck and failed. The 1960s saw computers attempt statistical analysis. No success. The 2000s brought cryptographers wielding AI. The script resisted them too, yielding patterns without meaning, order without key. Linguists coined a term for it, the undeciphered object. Modern researchers propose three camps. First, the cipher camp. The text encodes a real European language through substitution or steganography, perhaps to protect forbidden knowledge. Second, the constructed language camp. It's an artificial tongue invented by one mind, self-consistent but private. Third, the hoax camp. The whole thing is a 15th century con, crafted to fleece a patron who paid by the page. If so, it is the most elaborate swindle in intellectual history, a fake that still defeats supercomputers. Through all these theories, the book remains eerily alive. When scholars turn its pages, the ink seems almost wet, the handwriting fluid and human. You can feel the pulse of someone who believed or pretended to believe, that meaning hid just beyond reach. Perhaps that is why it haunts us. The Voynich manuscript is less a riddle to solve than a mirror. It reflects the human hunger to know, and the terror of realizing some knowledge may forever be closed. Each generation tries its code, its algorithm, its obsession, and fails. And in that failure the book triumphs, whispering, "You are not meant to read me. You are meant to dream me." The Lost Colony of Roanoke, Croatoan summer, 1587. A ship from England drifts toward the ragged coast of North Carolina, carrying 117 settlers, men, women, children, led by Governor John White. They name their new home Roanoke Colony, a fragile outpost in a vast wilderness. They plant, they build, they hope. Within months, dwindling supplies force White to sail back to England for aid. He promises to return swiftly. But the Atlantic has its own calendar. War erupts with Spain. Ships are seized for the defense of the realm. 3 years pass before White can return. When he steps ashore in August 1590, the colony is gone. Houses dismantled, fort palisades neatly removed, as if taken down by their builders, not attackers. No bodies, no struggle, only one word carved into a post, Croatoan. On a nearby tree, just 3 letters, CRO, cut deep, unfinished or interrupted. White had agreed with his colonists that if they moved, they would carve the name of their destination. If under duress a cross, there is no cross. There is only that single haunting word. Croatoan was the name of a nearby island, modern Hatteras, and of a friendly indigenous tribe. White's heart surges. Perhaps they relocated peacefully. But storms close in, his crew panics, and the rescue fleet sails home before he can search. He never sees his daughter or granddaughter, Virginia Dare, the first English child born in America, again. In the centuries that follow, Roanoke becomes an obsession. Theories multiply like ghosts. Some say the settlers joined the Croatoan people, intermarrying, their language and faith dissolving into a new culture, an early, quiet blending of worlds. Others insist they were massacred by hostile tribes or enslaved by Spaniards from Florida. A few point to carved stones discovered in the 20th century, the so-called Dare stones, claiming to bear messages from Virginia Dare herself. Most are proven hoaxes. A few remain unverified. Archaeologists have found tantalizing fragments. European pottery mingled with indigenous tools on Hatteras Island, metal artifacts inland near Bertie County, hinting that small groups may have split and survived. Yet no single site tells the whole story. Historians sift letters, supply lists, tribal oral histories. None close the wound. The Roanoke colony seems to have evaporated, absorbed or erased by the continent it tried to tame. Its disappearance became the first American myth, a cautionary whisper about hubris, isolation, and the thin line between civilization and wilderness. Imagine White standing on that empty shore, wind hissing through reeds, staring at the carved word that answers nothing. Croatoan, A direction? Farewell, a curse? The sea claws at his footprints, the forest watches, and history closes its mouth. 4 centuries later, the word still waits, etched not only in wood, but in the restless curiosity of every mind that cannot bear an unfinished sentence. The vanished Vikings of Greenland, silence beneath the Ice AD 985. The North Atlantic heaves like molten iron beneath a bruised sky. Our fleet of longships led by Eric the Red sights a barren coast veined with glaciers and green valleys. They call it Granland, Greenland, a name half prophecy, half advertisement. For 4 centuries, Norse settlers will till its thin soil, raise churches of stone and carve a fragile life between ice and ocean. Then, without war or plague, they vanish. The first generation prospers. At its height, 2 main settlements, the eastern and western settlements, house some 3,000 souls. They trade walrus ivory, furs and falcons with Europe, sending ships to Norway laden with proof that human endurance has no northern limit. In the church of Volsey, masons set an arch so perfect it still stands today, crisp against the Arctic wind. But by the late 1300s, the chronicles dim. The western settlement disappears first. No letters, no funerals. When a Norwegian ship visits in 1341, it finds empty farms and bleached bones. The eastern settlement lingers longer. Its last written trace is a wedding held in 1408, then silence. By the time Danish missionaries arrive in 1721, all that remains are ruins and whispers. What happened? The simplest culprit is climate. Around 1300, the world slid into the Little Ice Age. Summers shortened. Seas froze earlier. Grazing land withered under drifting snow. Cows starved, and the Norse farmers at heart refused to eat fish in large quantities, seeing it as food for poorer folk. Their stubborn fidelity to European habits became a death sentence, but ice alone doesn't erase a people. Another theory points to trade collapse. When Europe's ivory market shifted to African sources, Greenland's economic lifeline snapped. With no ships arriving, no news, and dwindling iron for tools, isolation hardened into extinction. Still others whisper of assimilation. The Norse coexisted uneasily with the Inuit Thule culture, who thrived on seal and whale. Archaeological finds show Inuit tools in Norse houses and Norse objects in Inuit camps. Perhaps some settlers learned the native way, hunting from kayaks, wearing furs instead of wool, and simply merged, abandoning old gods and European pride for survival. And then there is the darker vision, a slow, desperate end. A farm besieged by winter, last fires flickering, children slipping into sleep that feels like mercy. The Greenlandic sagas are silent because there was no one left to write. Today, satellites trace the ghosts, faint outlines of fields, church foundations beneath moss, and middens filled with walrus bones. At Brattahlid, Eric the Red's homestead, archaeologists found tiny glass beads from Europe, proof that once, even here, civilization's pulse reached the ice. When you stand amid those stones, the wind carries no answers, only the same question that haunts every vanished world. Did they die, or did they simply become someone else? The snow keeps its secret, and under that white shroud the Norse still wait, frozen between legend and survival. The death of Tutankhamun, the boy king's broken body, Egypt, 1323 BC. Night presses heavy over Thebes. Inside a palace scented with myrrh, an 18-year-old pharaoh struggles for breath. His name, Tutankhamun, means living image of Amun, but life is slipping through him like desert sand. By dawn he will be gone, and the greatest civilization on earth will begin the slow work of forgetting him. 3,000 years later, in 1922, Howard Carter and Lord Carnarvon crack the seal of his tomb and ignite the modern world's greatest archaeological fever. Gold glitters in torchlight, walls shimmer with painted eternity, and the boy's face, serene beneath a golden mask, seems to whisper secrets even his priests never knew. Yet his death remains Egypt's oldest crime scene. Was it murder? The early CT scans of the 1960s revealed a fracture at the base of the skull, and newspapers howled "Pharaoh assassinated." But later, imaging showed the crack occurred after death, perhaps during embalming. The murder theory faded, but suspicion lingered. Modern forensic teams have peeled the mystery layer by layer. DNA testing links Tutankhamun to the inbred line of Akhenaten, the heretic pharaoh who defied the gods. The boy's body shows malaria parasites, a clubfoot, and brittle bones consistent with congenital disorders. He likely limped, unable to stand long unaided, and suffered from a shattered femur, perhaps from a chariot crash or fall, that turned septic. Infection, fever, collapse. Still, each scan births new riddles. The embalmers packed his chest cavity with resin, but left his heart missing. A shocking omission, since the heart was the soul's compass in the afterlife. Some theorize it was destroyed by fire, when overly hot oils ignited inside the coffin, carbonizing the body. Others see ritual. Perhaps priests replaced his heart with the golden scarab found on his breast, inscribed, "Born again as the sun." Even his tomb murmurs of haste. It is small, walls painted in a single rush of ochre, clearly prepared for someone of lesser rank. He was buried quickly, likely because Egypt reeled from upheaval after Akhenaten's failed monotheism. Tutankhamun's sudden death forced a panicked restoration of the old gods. The priests needed the boy king interred before unrest consumed them, and so the young pharaoh who tried to heal a divided kingdom became the perfect symbol of mystery. Dead before adulthood, buried in gold, forgotten for millennia, then reborn in the modern imagination. Today, the CT reconstructions show an almost ordinary youth. Rounded chin, delicate jaw, uncertain eyes. Yet when you gaze into that golden mask, you feel something larger, the heartbeat of a world that once thought it could master eternity. Tutankhamun's riddle may never be solved, because it was never just about cause of death. It is about the fragility of divinity, how even gods can limp, fall, and die only to live forever in curiosity's light. The dancing plague of 1518, when the music wouldn't stop Strasbourg, July 1518, the cobblestones burn under a summer sun. A woman named Frau Trophäa steps into the street and begins to dance. No drum, no lute, just the whisper of her own feet. Neighbors laugh, then stare, then shudder, because she doesn't stop. Hours pass, then days. She dances until her body trembles, until her husband begs her to rest. She cannot. By week's end, 36 others join her, spinning in delirious rhythm. What begins as one woman's frenzy becomes an epidemic. The chroniclers call it choreomania, the dance mania. Within a month, nearly 400 citizens whirl through the market squares, collapsing from exhaustion, bleeding feet pounding in time to music only they can hear. Priests declare it punishment for sin. Doctors blame hot blood. The city council, desperate, orders musicians to play, believing the dancers must dance it out. They hire pipers and drummers. The music swells. The crowd surges. People die. Modern medicine stands baffled. Could it be ergot poisoning? A fungus infecting rye, producing LSD-like hallucinations? Possibly. But ergot also causes convulsions, not synchronized rhythm. Others propose mass psychogenic illness, a contagious hysteria born of stress. Strasbourg in 1518 was a tinderbox of misery. Famine, plague, religious anxiety, and grinding poverty. People lived under the constant threat of damnation and disease. In such pressure, ecstasy and madness become twins. The dancing may have been an unconscious rebellion against despair, a community literally shaking itself free of fear. Yet the records describe details too precise to dismiss as hysteria. Rhythmic movement, apparent awareness, even exhaustion managed by relays. When one collapsed, another took her place. The plague lasted weeks, then ebbed as suddenly as it began. By early September, the survivors were led to the shrine of St. Vitus, patron of dancers, to pray for release. After that, silence. No recurrence, no explanation, only bewilderment, and bodies buried without cause of death. Centuries later, psychologists read it as the body's rebellion against an unbearable age. Theologians as collective penance. Sociologists as the first recorded flash mob of despair. Each theory pirouettes, collapses, and rises again, like the dancers themselves, stand in Strasbourg's narrow lanes today. The modern city hums, trams whisper, cafes chatter. Beneath your feet lie the same stones that once throbbed with unending footsteps. If you listen long enough, you might almost hear it, the faint echo of a drum no one played. A reminder that human beings, when pressed past endurance, may turn suffering into the strangest ritual of all, a dance they cannot stop.